An expert in politics and governance in Melanesia says soon-to-be introduced amendments to Vanuatu's constitution aimed at curbing political instability could prove disappointing. Victoria University of Wellington professor in comparative politics, John Frankel, says the reforms do not take into account the tendency of office holders in Melanesia to manipulate systems for their own interests. He spoke with Koroi Hawkins, who began by asking him how effective the amendments would be in helping to curb political instability.
I think they will be disappointed. The Yes campaign over the last couple of months has been very much emphasizing the likelihood of greater economic development and more stability with these political institutions in place. I think over time we'll find that they get manipulated much as other institutions get manipulated in Western Melanesia, not just Vanuatu, but also Solomon Islands and Papua New Guinea. The experience there is that the office holders will not act in the way that they're expected to act. They will act in partisan ways. I'm thinking particularly of the Speaker, who is a political appointee, but also the presidents of political parties. They will act in their own interests. The trouble with this legislation is that it presupposes what it sets out to achieve. It presupposes that there already are strong political parties that can hold their party presidents to account and make them behave in a kind of internally democratic way. But that's very unlikely to be the case. The presidents will have their own interests.
And in terms of where these amendments sit in the wider legislation, they're only addressing a specific thing, which is the independence or single MP parties. Is that right?
Yes. The two amendments that have been passed are 17A, which requires a member of parliament to continue to support the same party during their term of office without defining what support means, which is going to be a problem. But the important bit about 17A is the possibility of expulsion of the MPs for switching sides, which would be referred by a party president to the Speaker. And then the Speaker is supposed to act in a non-partisan way. But, I mean, just look at what's happening in Fiji. The Speakers never act in a non-partisan way. And you can look back in Vanuatu history there as well. 17B is the other amendment. That's the one that is supposed to require independents or members of one-person parties to join a political party within 3 months. But it doesn't really stop them registering as parties within that time. So there's lots of possibilities of manipulation there. In Papua New Guinea, a lot of people responded to this by sitting as one-person parties. That can't be done in Vanuatu, but they could do something similar. It doesn't actually expressly, it stops people from coming into Parliament as members of one-person parties, but it doesn't necessarily stop them registering as one-person parties, in my reading.
And the 17B in particular is most vulnerable to constitutional court challenges. Is that your understanding as well? And how will that relate to 17A, if anything is dragged through the courts in relation to the application of these laws?
Yes, well, I mean, unlike Papua New Guinea, where the rules were declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court in 2010, Vanuatu has always been in a different position because its constitution requires a referendum over these party reforms. So that makes it less likely, I think, that the courts would rule these unconstitutional, but not impossible, because they may conclude that the reforms violate other parts of the Constitution to do with freedom of movement, which was the provision that proved so important in Papua New Guinea. I think the other dilemma that I think the politicians are aware of in Vanuatu is that they passed this Political Parties Registration Act in December that's supposed to fit in and underpin the operation of these new constitutional amendments. And there are some rather kind of strange provisions in that Political Party Registration Act that was passed in December that would likely be ruled unconstitutional by the courts, I think. And this hasn't been put to the referendum.
Bringing it full circle, just ending on the referendum results, quite significant yes votes nationally, but showing some differences between the islands from the results we're seeing. But also, what did you think of the turnout?
Yes, well, the turnout figures are difficult to calculate because the 2022 registered voter figure of 320,000, I'm told, is wildly inflated, which makes sense given the population is not supposed to be that large at all in Vanuatu. So it will be interesting to get decent registered voter data and have a look at turnout. But I always thought that it was likely that if you supported these constitutional amendments, you'd go and vote yes. But if you didn't support them, you probably wouldn't bother going to vote at all. After all, why would you vote against them? I don't think there's an enormous current of enthusiasm in the country for these amendments, but a lot of people will just be waiting and wanting to see how they eventuate. And I suspect when these amendments do get put into practice, if they get put into practice, there'll be quite a lot of cynicism and despondency about it, because it really won't achieve the stability that's been promised.